What file extension does a tab delimited file have? Delimited files usually have a file extension of .csv. What file extension should a tab delimited file have? When doing an export from Excel, it saves it as .text when selecting tab delimited, but wasn't sure if this was the standard. Thanks.
I have seen both TSV and text used, but between the two I have more commonly seen tab delimited files saved as text.
There is no single right answer. There has never been a centralized registry of file extensions, so selecting file extensions has always been a matter of convention, unless the software imposed constraints. In the days of DOS, the use of a standardized, well-known, file extensions became prevalent only for proprietary formats, like Lotus 123s, .wks, and base A/3s, .dbf, because the software itself either demanded one, you had no choice, or strongly suggested the file extension. For formats that didn't have any specific application associated with them, it was really up to the user to pick. Even then, some programs with proprietary formats, such as WordStar, didn't use standardized file extensions. It was common for WordStar users to use .let for letters, .doc for large documents, .inv for invoices, .text for indeterminate text, and so on. If you got a .doc file, you had no way to know what kind of file it was without context, or dumping it to see what it looked like inside. It could have come from literally dozens and dozens of programs, or it could be just a plain text file. A .boc file extension backup simply told you that this file formerly had a different file extension. A .bos file was almost certainly some sort of basic source file, but it could have been for MS Basic, Turbo Basic, or from just about any other competitor. Many times, files weren't saved with an extension at all. You knew what they were because of the label on the floppy that held them. Some people forewent the extension and used the extension characters so their file names could have up to 11 characters instead of the standard 8, for example, MikeJohn.son, or use the extension as a serial or version number, mathpaper.001, mathpaper.002, so on. Things started to change with Windows, I suspect mostly because Windows encouraged file extensions to be associated with individual programs in. When .ini, so program writers had really a strong incentive to use and take control of a distinctive, although not always with a sensible acronym, file extension. A small war ensued to see who owned common file extensions, like .doc, you know who won that one. Keep that context in mind. For text files, Notepad took over, .text, which was very common at the time. Other programs could open it of course, and in time, when you could register multiple editors for an extension, many programs did. However, the important thing is that this solidified its currently accepted meaning, a plain text file, with no formatting or markup of any sort, except possibly tabs and line terminators. What we call today comma-separated values files, were normally stored with a .text extension, because they were, well, files with plain text. Excel came along and needed to support values in text files where each column was separated by a comma, so they came up with .csv as a file extension they could register, and it stuck. There might have been a historical precedent of using .csv. I'm not aware of any. Funny enough, Tab-separated values files were never very common in DOS or Windows. Why? My guess, it was too hard for many DOS users to understand or work with tabs. It was a control character inherited from ASCII's control set intended for teletypes. Formally, it wasn't a printable character. The IBM PC character generator had a graphic for it, but to get it you had to write to the video card directly, so nobody really used it. Its exact meaning wasn't standardized. If you rendered the file to the screen or printed it, users couldn't see it or distinguish it from plan spaces. Many/most editors couldn't even insert it. So, nobody took that bait. No one took files with tab-separated values and come up with a file extension that became standard, by virtue of either custom or market dominance. .text is probably the most common file extension. .tsv is a fine choice if you need something uniquely different from .text. I've also seen and used .tab on occasion.
Pour conserver ta please consider